Once our database has been set up and our forms have been designed, we can continue to download Field Inspector from the Trimble website. Simply go to trimble.com and type Field Inspector in the search field. The first option will direct you to the Field Inspector support page. In this page, you'll be able to download the latest software release of Field Inspector and also all the documentation, including installation notes and some support notes. The download is approximately 500 megabytes. To install Field Inspector, simply double-click the newly downloaded setup file. Field Inspector has two installation options: standalone, which of course means all the aspects of Field Inspector will be installed on one computer, and obviously Enterprise, which refers to a distributed installation. Enterprise is much more practical because your database can now be on a remote server, while the Field Inspector desktop software can be locally on your laptop. I simply choose the aspects of Field Inspector I would like to install, like the desktop utility and the license manager, which have to go on the same computer, and I can click Next. On a remote server, I can install the processing service and also the communication service, which will handle my communication from the field to the office. Once my installation has been completed, the Trimble Field Inspector configuration utility will start. This utility will guide us to configure the Field Inspector software. The first step would be to configure my database connection, which we have done in the previous step of this tutorial. Click System DSN and add a new connection. Choose the SQL Server 11 driver. Specify a name for your database. And also specify the connection. In this case, it will be the local server, but it might as well be a remote address. Click Next. Here we will enter our authentication details, which will be the same as the details you used on installation. Choose the database containing the schema or the metadata and click Next. The connection can now be tested, and if everything is set up correctly, the test will complete successfully. Choose your database from the drop-down and specify login details. Test the connection again, and this will test if my schema is correctly set up. Click Next. In this screen, I can select my language: English, French, Spanish or Chinese, and also metric or US system. I specify the address of my communication server and click Next. I specify the address of my license manager, which is this computer, and I input my Trimble assistant details. This screen will talk about permissions, which is automatically set up, and if I click Next, the Field Inspector system will now be started up. In the license screen, I can specify the license I would like to use for this installation. The license, of course, will be allocated to the user's email address. My Field Inspector is licensed. I can click Next and Finish. When you have successfully configured your Field Inspector installation, the System Troubleshooter will start up. This is a very handy utility which will test all aspects of Field Inspector. As you can see on the left-hand side, there are green tick marks indicating that the services have correctly started up and there is communication. The database icon is red because it does not test for SQL Systems Administrator Authentication, which we are currently using. You're now ready to start up your Field Inspector. Simply click the Start button on your computer, go to Trimble, Field Inspector 2.3, and send the icon to the desktop.